With Family Search AI, the sources for a person are increasing. This video will give some discussion on what a primary and secondary source are and what is reliable and what's not reliable. A primary source is a first-hand account or original document created by someone who directly experienced or participated in an event, providing the most direct evidence of a topic or time period, such as a diary entry, a letter, an interview, a photograph, or historical document. They offer raw information and are considered the most reliable source for understanding an event as it happened. Think of it like a person who had an experience on a ship. They then share it with a friend. This is an example of a primary source. A secondary source is one step removed from primary sources. They often quote or otherwise use primary sources. They can cover the same topic, but add a layer of interpretation, analysis, and/or forget details. Think of it like a telephone game. Rarely does the information get passed on completely the same from one person to another. After multiple transfers of information, the information has drastically changed. Think of it like a person who had an experience on a ship. They then share it with a friend. The purple man received the story from his blue friend. He then turns around and shares the information with his green friend. We can find primary source examples from the following: diaries, letters, speeches, interviews, photographs, government documents, church documents, scientific data, artwork, and artifacts. Diaries and journals are wonderful sources. They are usually considered a primary source. They generally are reliable sources that can give us wonderful information. These are pictures of my great-great-grandmother Martha's diary. Most everything she wrote was about her day-to-day life. She also wrote a history of her life. It'd be wonderful if all of my ancestors did the same as she did. In diaries and journals, there may be stories told of events that they heard from someone else. In this case, the information may be reliable, but is considered a secondary source. Or in the case of my great-great-grandmother, Martha, she tells of a fire that started at the hotel next door and how they lost their home to the fire. This is a primary source as she actually fled the home and tells of her experience. But there have been questions about the hotel. My other great-grandfather owned a hotel in the town. For years I thought it was his hotel that burned down, but in recent years I found out that there was another hotel in the town, and it might have been the other hotel that burned down. She also mentions that there were 4 men boarding in their home at the time of the fire. She doesn't mention their names, so the information is reliable that there was a fire, but unreliable as to which hotel burned down and who else was affected from the fire. I'm going to walk you through some sources on Horatio Thompson. There's 119 sources, so the question is, do we need all of those sources? Are they really necessary, and how reliable are they? Okay, here is a land warrant. This is a government document, and this is probably the first land that he purchased. That gives us a starting time, not his birth, but he's about 23 years old, so it's the first record that we have of him. We have a court record. He became a constable. Is that really necessary? I don't know, but to me it's interesting. I learned something about him. He served as a constable. The next one is Horatio and David Thompson, he and his brother, owed money in a Pinnell estate. Mr. Pinnell was a merchant, a local merchant, and tons of people bought from him. And it just shows that they went to the store and purchased things, and we learned that they could purchase, on credit. They didn't have credit cards, but they could purchase on credit and then come back and pay later on. Again, absolutely necessary? Probably not, but interesting. Property tax, a government record. They paid taxes back then. a court record. He served on a jury, so they had jury duty back then. Again, not absolutely necessary, but interesting. We learn a little bit about him. Okay, here's another deed where he's selling land. And then there must have been a problem with it because Samuel Fuqua versus John Thompson, that's their father, it was his estate, and they were taking care of it, and John probably died and everything did get paid, so Horatio and David are, or Horatio, I can't remember if they're both in there, are taking care of that. Okay, here's another court record, and this one I probably need to go through and do like I've done here and fix it up so that I know what it's about. I don't have any idea what that court record is about. That's the importance of fixing and editing these. A Superior Court Order book. Horatio Thompson, probably as a constable, has said that somebody was unlawfully gaming in his household. Okay, and these are, they know everybody around, so I think that would be hard because it's somebody that you know. Anyways, again, just more information about a person. Okay, so let's go down here a little bit farther. Here's 1810. We have a marriage bond, a marriage bond, a marriage bond. Horatio, a marriage, Virginia marriage, and a Virginia marriage. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but some of them are duplicates. They are exactly the same record, or in a different format, but they're coming from the same place. It's up to you whether you want to have every document that's there. Some of these are from the county. Some of them got put into different databases. And so, like this one here is from 1767 to 1682. This one says the same thing. So I'm not sure how they got into, to me, I just don't know that we need both of those. I'm going to leave them in there for now, but occasionally I have found where there's like 20 marriage records on the same marriage, and I don't think we need all of those. And so you can kind of clean up the sources by deleting those that you feel are duplicates, complete duplicates. I'm going to leave them here for now. Okay, so you get an idea of why these are important and how we can learn from them. Excuse me. If we come down here to 1819, we have a deed from Horatio Thompson and his wife to Little Barry Lewis. They're selling property. And then we find out in 1820, he's in Barron County, Kentucky. So he probably moved in 1819, sold his land and moved to Barron County, Kentucky. And these are the things that are important. We see where they change, because if we keep looking in Pennsylvania, Virginia, for records on him, we're probably not going to find very many. There might be something that, an old record of something that came up. Here's one, personal property tax of Pennsylvania. He probably still had some land and had to pay some property taxes, but most of the records you're going to find now are going to be in Barron County, Kentucky. So these sources are important. They verify that they were there, that they were still alive. If all of a sudden you see them drop off and there's no more sources, it's a sign that they moved to somewhere else or they've passed away. And hopefully you can find something that shows that they've passed away. In this case, he shows up in the will of his father, John Thompson, so we know that his father passed away. Anyways, these sources are, you want to make them reliable sources, and as we saw in Ann Jennings, some of them are not so reliable, but you might want to keep them there just because they do give you information to try to find more sources. Anyways, it's important to make these understandable and make sure that they do need to be there and that they actually are in there, or explain why you put that there. Maybe it's that somebody moved next door to them in the land next door, but make sure that they actually pertain to that person. Sometimes there's duplicate names like John Thompson. It's really hard sometimes to distinguish one John Thompson from another, and so you want to try to, this is what the sources are for, is to try to clarify who they are and what they did. And anyways, these sources are important. This is Archibald Skaggs, and he has a diary in his sources. And diaries are usually fairly reliable. But I want to show you on this source, if we go to this link here, nothing, it doesn't work. So let's go back. We can see that this is from some other source. This one here says that it's from Family Search, and these will usually, I've never had a problem with those. If there is a problem, they will change the link and eventually it will work. But these outside sources are not careful to always, they have changes and you may lose the link, and obviously that's what happened here. But on this down here, we can see that somebody modified this source in 2023 and they gave this as the record. So I clicked on that and I got the site can't be or is not a secure connection. But I went ahead and went to this right here, history, and it's on the Skaggs, which is my family. My line is Skaggs and Thompson. And it's a great site for the Skaggs, but I couldn't find Archibald Thompson's diary here anywhere. Now, if we look here, this is .com, and I'm going to get rid of this one. But if we go here, it says Thompson diary. I'm going to try it one more time, and maybe that was, see if I didn't get the whole thing in there. Oh, there it is. Okay, so you have to be careful to get the whole thing. Okay, section 1, Lucy Skaggs. So I haven't looked through this, but here's the information on it. It's not the actual records, but this is the information. It tells you what page, so this is a transcription of it. So gratefully this person put that in, and so you've got the different pages and what it says in there, but you don't see. Let's go down farther down, see if there's any copies. I don't see images of that, but there is the source. Okay, so let's go back to Archibald, because I want to show you here that somebody did a great job. Look at here. They've taken, and it's not all the pages, but some of the pages. Here's the document. They've got an image of it. They tell what it's about. They title it Item 1. They tell about this part of it, that it's a Xerox copy of the page. Item 2 is the transcription of it. Now this is what I want to show you. So this is a wonderful source because we actually can see it. And you have a transcription. Now, when you think about it, Archibald, he's the son of John and Mary. Mary is the wife of John. It says his wife, meaning John, not Archibald's. And this was his birth date. Okay, let's go back here. Nope. Okay. I've got it on here, so, and I'm going to go back to here. Sorry about this. I'm going to go back to Archibald. I just want to go back to the details on it. Okay, here's Mary, and she's born 3 years later. She's born 6 years later, years after Archibald, and Anne was born before. Okay, so let's go back here to this source. Obviously, Archibald, if we look at primary sources, he was not present when his sister was born, and even if he was, such as with Mary and Lucy, he may have been there in the house, but he probably wasn't in the room with his mother. But he was 3 and 6 years old. I don't think he remembered. So most likely this information is secondary, that Archibald got the information from his mother, or one of his siblings recorded the information, which they probably got from the mother. So it's probably secondary or tertiary or farther removed. But I still think it's very accurate information. It looked like somebody was taking good records, and I think wherever he got the records from, that was eventually, probably was from a primary source. So I think this is still a reliable source to take it from Archibald's diary. Well, meet my Grandma Blanche, Grandma Schwartz. Many years ago, I interviewed her, and I used a tape recorder, I have not transcribed the information, but my daughter did divide it up into smaller sections, and she uploaded this conversation with my grandmother and put it into the audio memory section of Family Search. So I'm going to show you, here's memories, and you can add memories here, and it says add audio. I'm going to go down and find those audio files. They are down here on the bottom. You can see here they are. There's 4 of them. And so it's really fun because actually you can hear my voice and my grandmother's voice on there, and some of my children because they were there and talking. So after my grandmother's passing, my aunt learned something about her mother's life that she didn't know. She was talking to some of her cousins at one of the family reunions. I'd asked my grandmother why she moved from her hometown to another state. That's where she met my grandfather. She didn't mention this incident that these cousins told my aunt about, but I'm positive that is why she moved. Some of my grandmother's nieces and nephews knew of the situation and told my aunt. We now have documents to prove that their story is correct. So in this case, my grandmother just decided not to tell the whole story. It doesn't mean it didn't happen because she didn't tell me. Most of the primary sources are reliable, but occasionally they either leave things out or tell the story in a different way than it actually happened. So I would consider most of this audio file, these things I asked my grandmother, to be reliable, but as I found out, there's some things that aren't totally correct. So just beware when you're looking at these sources to make sure that they're as reliable as possible, and sometimes there's nothing we can do to prove that they are or aren't. But sometimes things pop up that might shock us, that says that it really isn't the way that somebody said that it is. So just be careful with the sources and do the best that you can. Examples of secondary sources are books, magazines, some documents, tombstones, and the list of primary sources can often be secondary sources. Let me give you a few examples. I served a mission in Ecuador. While there, my mother wrote to me faithfully every week. I saved those letters, but had forgotten about them. When we moved in 2023, I found those letters. Most of the information in these letters would be considered primary and reliable sources because my mother is describing what she witnessed and saw during the week. But on occasion she would say, Mrs. So-and-so told me. In this case, it would be secondary information, yet in most cases I wouldn't consider it reliable. My mother had a charm bracelet and had a charm made for each of her children with their birth dates. When she got the charms, she noticed that my brother's birthday was incorrect. The birth date was July 11th, but should have been July 10th. Anyone looking at that bracelet today might think it was a reliable source. This is an example of a secondary source and how information can become inaccurate and unreliable. A birth certificate is a government document and considered a primary and reliable source. In the case of one of my daughters, most of the information is accurate. My labor with her was too fast, so my husband called 911 and 7 firemen came for her delivery. My husband was actually the one that delivered her with the help of one of the firemen. My daughter was born at home. My next visit to my OB/GYN, they asked me about my daughter's birth so they could send off for the birth certificate. When we got the birth certificate, it said that she was born in the hospital in Fort Worth, Texas, not in our hometown. And the doctor's name was the attending physician, even though he was nowhere around when she was born. In reality, birth certificates are secondary sources because those filling out the information were not present. In this case, even some of the information on the certificate is inaccurate. Tombstones are secondary sources. The person creating the tombstones were not present at the birth or death of the person. The person supplying the information generally was not present at the birth of the person that died and often was not present when the person died. Though the information on the tombstones is generally accurate, it is common to have mistakes. Death certificates are a mixture of primary and secondary information and is considered a reliable source. Like a birth certificate, information is collected by a doctor or nurse and a person who knew the deceased person. This information is given to a secretary to fill out the information, so in reality, it is a secondary source. The birth information is usually collected from a family member, but in most cases, that person was not at the birth unless it was the mother or father giving the information. So do not be surprised when you find conflicting information on one source and the death record. It is important to find all sources possible to document the life of a person and give a good overview of their life. This is not always possible, but we should do the best we can. My fourth great-grandfather had a time period where I was not sure where he was. I needed more sources. I had documents of him in Pennsylvania, Virginia, Barron County, Kentucky, and Morgan, Indiana. For years I wasn't sure when he moved to Morgan, Indiana. I recently found records of him living near his brother in Hardin, Tennessee. After his brother passed away, he moved to Morgan, Indiana. Those documents I found in Hardin, Tennessee filled a gap of time that I didn't know where he was. Thus, he moved from Virginia to Kentucky, from Kentucky to Tennessee, from Tennessee to Indiana. Let's review questions to think about with the sources. Does the person need this source? Do you need duplicate sources? Is the document a primary, secondary, tertiary source? Is the document a reliable source that gives accurate and necessary information? Does the date or information need to be corrected for clarity? Do you need more sources about this person? There's always more to find on people. We never have the full story. Sourcing is the way to put the puzzle of our ancestors' lives together with sources that are primary, secondary, reliable, and hopefully not unreliable. Happy hunting!